Okay. I'm going to speak to you briefly. Greetings again. Happy Mother's Day to all. On a theme, mothering in times like these. And usually on Mother's Day, we address our remarks to biological mothers, stepmothers, adoptive mothers. But today, I think it is important to also include anyone who has responsibility for nurturing, molding, leading children and young people, whether in the secular or spiritual arena. So this definition broadens the category to include spiritual mothers and also any males who perform the role that a mother would perform. So we're talking about times like these, and we think it is important for us to understand the times in which we live. 1 Peter 4 tells us, "But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober-minded and watch unto prayer." And the purpose of today is to help us to be sober-minded so that we can watch unto prayer. Well, how would we define these times? Some would say that these are the end times. Others may say we are at the 11th hour. And still others may say that we are in the toenails of time, referring to Daniel chapter 2 with the image that was gold, silver, bronze, and the toes were clay and iron. But whatever label we choose to put on the times, we can define these times by what we see happening around us. We are living in, I don't know if to say interesting or strange, but we are living in some times. When we consider the technological and scientific advances we have made over the centuries, we can conclude that we have come full circle to the Tower of Babel, that moment and time. Mankind now has the knowledge and the technology to do almost anything he sets his mind to do, and he wants to prove that he is as good as God. Now, at the same time, while we have that Babel moment, the moral decay and the rise of wickedness, not only in Barbados but around the world, rivals the time of Noah and the time of Lot. And at each of these moments in history, God was forced to assert his divine authority. So at the Tower of Babel, he segregated them, different languages. They wanted to reach heaven, for those of you who don't know that story. For the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah, God destroyed them with fire. And in Noah's time, for the wickedness of those people, he drowned the world in flood waters. And we have these three, if we want to call them cultures, converging on this generation. This convergence has given rise to what I am terming the time of the reprobate mind. The reprobate mind is a mind or a person who will consciously and deliberately reject the truth. It's staring you in your face, but you reject it and choose to believe a lie. And then as we look around, what they're doing is they're set out there to convince everybody else that that lie is the truth. And 2 Timothy 3:1-8 puts it like this. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money. They will be boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control. They'll be brutal, not lovers of anything that is good. They will be treacherous, rash, conceited. They will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness when we look to the church, but denying its power. And the exhortation is to have nothing to do with those people, for they are the kind of people who are loaded down with sins, and they're swayed with all kinds of evil desires, always learning but never able to come to a knowledge of the real truth. And just as Janus and Jambres opposed Moses, so also though these people oppose the truth. They are men of reprobate mind who, as far as the faith is concerned, are rejected. And so, the result of the reprobate mind culture is a challenge to the timeless laws established by God from the beginning of creation. These laws are being perverted and they're being turned inside out in our day, in our times. For example, the Bible tells us male and female, God created them. But in these times now, an individual can choose on any given day to be whatever gender he desires. He could be a man today and a woman tomorrow, and when that is not good enough, they can choose from 72 other genders. And we have people with passports now in countries. You have male, female, or other as your legitimate choice. And people are being tormented for not going along with this. That's part of the reprobate mind culture that is taking us over today. Science now has the knowledge and skill and resources to facilitate all these requests. So if I'm a man and I want to be a woman, science can, the doctors can operate and make the change and vice versa. And other laws like the law of love, which is the greatest commandment of all, and harmony and tolerance, respect for authority, they're all being supplanted or replaced by hatred of those who are different from us. It's being replaced by chaos and intolerance and an insensitivity to the sanctity of life that we biological mothers and others hold very dear. We are living in times when babies can be aborted for any reason or no reason at all. And so many people are advocating that even up to birth, that we can deliver the child, make the child comfortable, and ask the mother what the mother wants. And if she doesn't want it, they will terminate the child's life. This is the culture of the reprobate mind, and this is the times we live in. This is the times that we are mothering in and have to bring up our children in these times. So bad that some people don't even want to have any because these times are so bad. And all of this is in direct opposition to what God prescribes. So what does this mean for us here as we nurture and mold our charges? We may think that some of these things are far removed from us, but with the way the world is and the technology making the whole world a village, in time they will reach us, as some of them have already. We used to watch the violence on television, hear it on the news, even when it came to like Jamaica and Trinidad, and we never thought that it would reach us. But today, we are all impacted by violence that has crept into our society. And as we nurture and lead our charges, we must not only have an appreciation for the times that we were talking about just now in which we live, but we must also have an understanding of the fact that there is an evil force that is dedicated to shaping our children, both our secular and spiritual children, in the image of these reprobate times. So very often we celebrate a God who does not slumber. We rejoice in telling people that our God don't slumber, he don't sleep, don't take vacation, and he's available to every one of us 24/7. But the news that I have for you this morning is that God's nemesis, the devil, the enemy of our children's souls, is also spirit, and therefore he does not slumber, he does not sleep, he does not take vacation, and he's available to his people 24/7. And we can't forget that. We cannot dismiss him. We don't give him too much pride or place, but we should not dismiss him. The difference is that while God's words and God's actions are spirit and give life, the devil's words and action bring death. And Peter in 1 Peter 5:8 cautions us, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, is like a roaring lion walking about, looking for someone to devour, and he's looking to devour not just us, but our children, natural and spiritual. Now, devour doesn't mean to eat, but rather to change them so fundamentally in a direction that is opposite to what God mandates, that the soul is lost and cannot inherit the eternal home that God has prepared for that soul. We must also have an appreciation for the methods that are utilized to win over our children if we're going to do an effective job as God would want us to do. And the biggest one is that true and tried method that was employed since the Garden of Eden with Eve, which is appeal to the senses, look, smell, how it tastes. They appeal to the senses and then to the intellect. God knows you're going to be like him, knowing good and evil. For us in the church, how when he tempted Jesus, you're throwing some scriptures, but it is a corrupted scripture, meaning that it is inaccurate because something has been changed. But we know it's so good, so we take it as the truth. Now, indoctrination, which is, we think it's a bad thing because people use it for bad, and then those of us who have good don't use it. But indoctrination, meaning turning somebody's mind and being able to control them, is more successful when the candidates are young. That's why they're trying for our children. The efforts to influence their thinking and behavior of our children, they are deliberate, they are constant, they're subtle, so sometimes we don't understand what is happening. And they're comprehensive, meaning all-embracing and unrelenting. We don't sleep, and while we jumping up and we praising and we having a good time, he is scheming and putting his plans in place, and we're seeing a lot of it now coming to fruition. But they were unrelenting, and they were planning and working behind the scenes. They reach our children via social media. We know that is taboo. The young people are very much tied to it. Television programs, movies, books, even the cartoons and the music. All of these are avenues that the enemy of our souls and our children's souls will use to turn them against God and against the laws of God and let them buy into this reprobate mind culture. And when they have them from young, it is very hard to turn those that have been indoctrinated, especially at a young age. Only the redemptive power of the Holy Spirit can undo the damage. Now, all these factors combine to make the job of parenting more difficult than it needs to be. And so if we allow that mentality to take root in a child, there's going to be conflict, tension, friction between the child and the parent all the time. And whether Christian or not, we're going to be impacted by the consequences of these times in which we live. So we cannot lose sight of this fact, for it should influence our approach to how we mold and lead and parent our children. Our charges are the future leaders, both of the country and of the church. And there's much evidence that the roaring lion is winning the fight for the souls of our children. And that lion is winning, obviously, because we are failing our children, and we are failing them in love. And what I mean by that is, in the home, we have convinced ourselves that we love our children so much that we are going to spare them the hardships that we went through when we were growing up. So we don't make them do anything difficult. We give them everything. They don't have to work for anything. And we've made life very easy for them. But in doing so, we have done them a disservice. For we have made them soft. They are entitled. They feel entitled. They must have everything. And they're spoilt to some degree. They know very little about persevering and their lack of fighting spirit. And I know because I see it every day. Far too many of them, if it's going to take effort, it is deemed to be too hard, and therefore they ain't going to do it. If you give them more than 2 lines to write, gee, that's some of that, all of that, and they're not writing. It happens with schoolwork, but it also happens with other activities as well. They capitulate or they give in at the drop of a hat. That kind of attitude does not build strong homes, and it certainly will not build a strong nation. To many of our students, to many of our children and young people, they're not interested in doing wholesome things, and all of that was in the passage that we read in Timothy. They're not interested in behaving like ladies and gentlemen. I tell some of my girls, put your knees together, sit like a lady, man, that's uncomfortable. Instead, they are drawn to the baser and the negative behaviors, sitting with their feet wide open. And sadly, there's some version of this also in the church. In some ways, we who have the responsibility to nurture the young in the church, we've gone soft on them as well. Bible tells us that in these days, some people not want to endure sound doctrine. And in the church too, we believe that in times past, the standards were too draconian. You compress your hair. You couldn't wear anything in the short sleeves. Your collar had to be up here, right? And we believe that those things were too draconian, no jewelry or anything. So now we ease upon them and we let a lot of things slide. The result is that deep spirituality is lacking to some degree, and to a lesser degree than we would like to see it. And therefore, we don't have a lot of young people in the church looking to be church leaders. So it seems that we have failed to pass on that passion for the work of the Lord and that passion to walk holy, not just before God, but before the world. So what can we do? Given the times in which we live and the real possibility that God may be getting ready to assert his divine authority, because remember we said that at these particular times in history, God had to step in and do something. And if we've got all these things going on at the same time, God may very well be getting ready to assert his divine authority in this world. So we must have some sense of urgency about filling the hearts and minds of our young people with godliness and goodness. And to do so, just as the enemy applies tried and true methods, we have some. And God set them out for us in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And almost every time we have a christening here, they are read. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, which means we have to know them first. And you shall teach them diligently to your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you drive, when you lie down, when you get up. And to keep them always there, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your forehead and write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. What this passage speaks to taking time and effort to shape the young minds entrusted to us by God. It speaks of having clear goals, and it suggests very strongly that we are repeating and modeling by our behavior, because we have to know it first, the important things over and over, not getting tired until they get it, until they get what we are teaching them. This method guarantees success at home and in the church. You got to do it more with some than others, but we have to do it. That method is tried and true. You learn something by heart, you don't forget it. Now, you don't have to call yourself a Christian to comply with Deuteronomy 6. You just need to recognize the value of spiritual education. In former times, our parents and grandparents, they would not have called themselves Christians, some of them, but they understood the importance of exposing their charges to the Christian experience. and they appreciated the necessity to fill the minds and hearts of their charges and children with the right things. And so, even though they weren't coming, they sent their charges to church. Very little of this happens in this day. In fact, parents ask the children if they want to go. By our time, you had a choice. And so that morning, they had to go morning to Wesleyan, evening, down there next to Harrison College, and church, and big church and everything. They didn't have any choice. And that's because our foreparents intuitively or instinctively understood that the human mind and heart were created to be filled with the Spirit of God. They didn't went to school long, but they had good sense and they understood the important things. And if we who are charged with the care today fail in our duty to provide the avenue that God can fill the spirit, the hearts and minds of our young people, a void is going to be filled. A void is going to be created, and it's not going to stay void. Something will fill it. When Jesus cast out the demons, said, you know, if you don't stay true, he's going to come back and bring some more. You're going to be worse. So if we don't make sure that they're filled with the Spirit and knowledge of God, then that void is going to be filled, and it's going to be filled by darkness and not light. So as I conclude, I want to encourage us to nurture, mold, lead, and model in such a way that whenever God decides to take action, that we are found worthy to be part of the remnant, to be part of the protected of God, as we because when we look at Noah, we look at Lot. Whenever God brought the judgment, he looked for his people and he protected them. And in some other places with the children of Israel, they call them the remnant. And so we want that what we do for ourselves or what we do for our children will put them in that place that they are seen as the remnant and the protected of God, no matter what God decides to do because of these times that we are living in. And the challenge as we began was to be sober-minded and to watch and pray, and that's where I'm going to close. Again with that challenge that in all things we cover ourselves, we cover our children, our charges in prayer every day, all day, looking onto the coming of the Lord. And again, you don't have to be what we call a born-again Christian to pray over your children, to pray over your charges, because I know we have people here this morning who will say they're not Christian. But we just want you to know that God hears everybody, and the call is to whosoever will. And you can present your children before God, and you don't have to be called a Christian. And you can cover them and ask God to be with them. You can ask him to help you to discern the times, which is the point of this message. It's not exhaustive because they only gave me 15 minutes, but just want us to understand and to recognize that we have an awesome responsibility. And so prayer and praise, as we've been hearing already today, is a mighty weapon, and we need to use it over our children and ensure that the enemy of their souls does not get them and fill them with this reprobate mind that is engulfing the earth. Let's bow our heads. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for today. We thank you for the opportunity to celebrate mothers. We also thank you for the opportunity to share your word. And I ask, dear God, that for every one of us, and I include myself, that you would touch our hearts. You would help us to discern the times in which we live, to have a better understanding and not to think that everything is afar from us and it is not going to touch us, because our children are already being taken over by the enemy by that reprobate mind. They don't want to hear about anything good. They run after all the bad, and the good they don't want anything to do with. And so we're asking you to help us this morning to get down on our knees. There's no special formula to pray. One of our songs this morning said, they know God don't need no formula for what he has to do. Just whatever it is that is on your heart for the welfare of your children, just say it to God anyhow, and he will get it and understand it. And so, God, we ask that from today we would look at these children that you have given us, whether it's in the church or our own, and we would understand the fight that is happening for them. For in a different sense, you told a different place in the scripture that our warfare is not carnal, and we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places that we don't understand. We may not understand it all, but you do. And we're just asking you, Father, to just give us that sense of what is needed, a sense of urgency that yes, we want to enjoy you, but then also help us to understand this awesome responsibility and burden that we have to reach these children and keep them for you, to keep them from the enemy, that he cannot have them. So let us purpose in our hearts that he cannot have them, and that they will be part of the protected and the remnant that we can have if the world tarries, if you tarry and the world proceeds, that we can have godly people to lead the church, to lead the schools, to lead politics, that at least Barbados, Lord, that we can look around, and as Abraham negotiated, that Barbados would be counted among those countries that are deemed worthy to be saved. So help us, Lord, not to be weary in well-doing, not to get tired, but to continue to contend for the faith and to contend for the souls of our children. For they are our future. And you have a bright future for them. We have to ensure that they can step into it. So bless all the mothers here this morning, and bless all those who may not be biological mothers, but all those who mother and who have responsibility for nurturing children, and help us and empower us and equip us to be successful as we mother in these perilous times. May God bless you.